All right. Howdy. That was a sorry howdy for a bunch of Texans. Howdy. There we are. Joke's on you guys. I just got you all to take part in a Texas A&M Aggie tradition. Congratulations. Joke's on you. All right. Well, I'm very happy to be here tonight. If you don't know me, my name is Adam Broussard. You might know me by another group of Broussards in the room. My parents are in the back, Dane and Terry Broussard. They teach one of our high school Sunday school classes. And I'm very excited to be here tonight to be able to talk with you guys about kind of biblical cosmology from the perspective of someone who actually does cosmology research. What's up with that? So just to give you a little bit of background about myself, I went to Texas A&M University, for a Bachelor of Science in Physics, and after that, I went on up to New Jersey to study astrophysics. I got my PhD there. It took me about 6 years, and then I graduated just this past October and moved back here for work. So I've made a big, I don't know, maybe not a loop, but a line up to the Northeast and back. Believe it or not, I was actually sitting in these very chairs, maybe even these very chairs, not too long ago. So I was in your exact place, sitting in Refuge and listening to the message. So you too might be able to come up and do this someday. All right. So my research was on galaxy star formation and cosmology. That was kind of my area of expertise. And so tonight, we're going to dig into the story of creation in the Bible that we find in Genesis 1. Some of the most famous words that have ever been written. Before we get too deep into that, though, who likes inside jokes? Does anybody have inside jokes with your friends? All right. One of my favorite inside jokes that I have with my wife, Anna, is that we say the exact opposite of what we mean, particularly when it comes to food. And this gets me in trouble sometimes. So in particular, if we have something really good in front of us, I'll look at Anna and tell her, you don't want any of that. It's no good, right? And that doesn't mean that it's actually bad. What it means is I'll take that off your hands and you can have something else, right? And so if you didn't know the context of that in our relationship, that we say the opposite of what we mean when it comes to food, you might be kind of shocked. And in particular, I actually had dinner with a friend last week, maybe the week before last, where we were at a restaurant and she said, "How is the food?" And I said, "Nah, it's okay." And she immediately was like, "I'm so sorry." And I had to explain to her, no, sorry, that means it's actually very good. I was just joking. I just have a very dry sense of humor. So I'm about to tell you a 4,000-year-old joke, one of the oldest jokes in recorded history, okay? So is everybody prepared to hear a 4,000-year-old Sumerian joke? All right, everybody strap in. All right, this is going to be it. Here it goes. A dog walks into a tavern and says, "I can't see anything. I'll open this one." I appreciate the one pity laugh in the audience. All right, so what's the deal with this, right? This is a joke that somebody thought was so funny that they would write it down, and it's made it all the way through 4,000 years of history to today, but we don't get it, right? Because there's some aspect of Sumerian life that we don't have as a part of our life, right? So we have no context for what this joke means. We have no idea why it's funny. An example from today would be if someone said, a priest, a rabbi, and a minister walk into a bar, and the bartender says, "What is this, a joke?" Right? We know that's funny, but for like an alien looking at our civilization, they wouldn't know why that was funny, right? They'd have no clue. They would think that these very serious characters, for some reason, become very humorous when they're all together, right? And in the right location. So before we talk about ancient texts in the Bible, by the way, this is my dog that's up there on the screen. I had to make sure to sneak Leica in there. That's our dog, Leica. But before we are able to really talk about these ancient texts in the Bible, like Genesis, which was written in BC 1500 or so, we're not going to have any idea what they're saying unless we first understand the perspective from which they were written. So with that, let's dive in to the biblical account of the creation of the universe. So Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 and 2 says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters." Not to be confused with my waters here. So let's talk a little bit about how we learn about God. What are the different ways that we learn about God? When I think about this, I think about three different things. The first one is our emotions and the Holy Spirit. So this is going to be things that we're convicted about, right? These are internal promptings from God. This is possibly the most powerful way that we learn about God, right? Because these are things that we just know about, right? That it's something internal. The second way that I think of is the Bible, right? The Bible is kind of the obvious answer. It's a document or a collection of documents that God gave us that's meant to be a representation of who he is and what his relationship is with us. But the third way that a lot of people don't think about is our observations. It's the things around us. So this encapsulates anything around us, right? The things that we observe, things like science. So we don't just believe in the truth of the Bible because the Bible says so, right? Any document can go around claiming anything, right? We believe it because it matches up with what we see and with what we understand internally, right? So I made it one of my highest goals in life to become a world expert in astronomy. And I think that it's really fascinating because it's at this confluence of all these different areas of life, whether it's art or a lot of people find it very inspiring, but it's also scientific and there's lots of discovery involved, right? So in particular, Plato, the great philosopher, he said, "Astronomy compels the soul to look upwards and leads us from this world to another." There's a poem called "From the Old Astronomer to His Pupil" by Sarah Williams that says, "Though my soul may set in darkness, it will rise in perfect light. I have loved the stars too fondly to be fearful of the night." And then we also have examples of poetry, even in the Bible, of people talking about how amazing it is to look up at the stars. Like David in the Psalms, where he says, "The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day, they pour forth speech. Night after night, they reveal knowledge. They have no speech. They use no words. No sound is heard from them. Yet their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world." And that's Psalm 19, verses 1 through 4. So we can see that whether it's secular or theological sources, we have all of these, whether they're religious or non-religious. There's this understanding in humanity. There's something in humanity that compels us to learn more about the cosmos. We can feel that it's significant, right? Even if we can't explain it. So why is that? Well, it's because God's fingerprints are on everything that he creates. So if we want to get an idea of how big and how majestic and how beautiful and powerful God is, what do? We look up, right? Because that's the closest thing we have. It's not a full representation, but it's as good of a representation as we can get in the physical world, right? And that's exactly why I decided to study astronomy, is because I get to look at some of these really, really cool parts of the universe that image who God is in a really unique way. So let's talk a little bit about modern cosmology, all right? I'm going to tell you something about the state of our universe here. So first of all, what is cosmology? Cosmology comes from the Greek word cosmos, with a K in it. That means order, and logos, which is the word for word. So literally, cosmology, the word cosmology means a word about the order of things, or a discussion of how things are ordered. In our terms today, we understand that as being a study of the universe as a whole, right? So we're studying the universe from the beginning of time to as far out as we can possibly predict in the biggest terms possible. That's what cosmology is. And to understand cosmology, we have to know who Dr. Edwin Hubble is, this dapper gentleman here. So you may have heard of the Hubble Space Telescope, and now you're going to know why it's called the Hubble Space Telescope, because this is an important dude. So Dr. Edwin Hubble is extremely important to astronomy. The first of his discoveries that we'll talk about is that at the time of Dr. Hubble, we knew that the Milky Way was about 100,000 light years across, and he actually was able to show that that we were receiving light from somewhere beyond 100,000 light years away. So before his discovery, we actually didn't know that there were galaxies outside of the Milky Way galaxy. And now we know that there are hundreds of billions of galaxies outside of the Milky Way galaxy, which is insane. So to give you an idea of that, this was actually the image that Hubble took. This is his original image. And you can see that there's a location there that's highlighted and it says VAR, V-A-R exclamation point. That's because he saw a variable star in the Andromeda Nebula, and he was able to determine from the pulsing of this star that that had to be coming from outside the Milky Way. It was too far away to be inside the galaxy. And the reason they called it the Andromeda Nebula is because they didn't know what it was. Nebulas are kind of just these blobby things in the sky. And nowadays, this is the image of the Andromeda galaxy that we have, taken from the Hubble Space Telescope. So now you can see what the true Andromeda galaxy looks like. Not only did Hubble discover that the universe is bigger than the Milky Way, which is wild in its own right, but he also discovered that the universe is expanding. And he did that with his 1929 paper called A Relation Between Distance and Radial Velocity in Extragalactic Nebulae. So they still weren't actually sure that these things outside the galaxy were in fact other galaxies. They just called them extragalactic nebulae. But he has a plot here where he shows that there's a linear relationship between how far a galaxy is and how fast it's moving away from us. So this was proof that the universe is expanding. And more importantly, this was proof that if you back the universe up, that it must have had a beginning. Because before this, we didn't know that the universe had a beginning. Maybe the universe has been here always, right? So especially if you were here for the apologetics talk a couple of weeks ago, you're probably familiar with this. I can't remember if he showed this exact plot or not. But this Edwin Hubble was the one who first found scientific evidence for the beginning of the universe, which points to a creator. Now then, these fields of cosmology and extragalactic astronomy don't exist without him. This is a picture of the James Webb Space Telescope's deep field, which is similar to the Hubble deep field. And you can see almost every spot of light in this image is a galaxy. And not only is it a galaxy, but every galaxy in this image is extremely old. So the light from these galaxies is very old. So these are some of the youngest galaxies in the universe because that light has been traveling to us since the very beginning of the universe, or very early parts of the universe. So what do we know about the universe now? So I'm not mincing words, and I'm not kidding you when I say that we know a pretty good amount, about 5% of the universe. So the universe is composed of about 72% dark energy. That's stuff that we don't understand very well, but we know it makes the universe want to expand faster and faster. It's composed of about 23% dark matter. That's stuff that we don't understand very well, but we know that it has gravity. We can't directly observe it, but we know that it pulls things together like normal matter does. And then it's about 5% normal matter. So everything that you're seeing in this image is that 5%. And the other 95%, we have a very broad understanding at best of the universe. So I think that this is really exciting because God has put us in a unique universe that's really expansive, extremely complex, and very well hidden, right, in a lot of ways, but also very accessible. And that means that we can explore and enjoy his creation over the course of an extremely long period of time, right? So we're not missing out on this 95% of the universe because we're not trying, believe me. We're spending billions of dollars and some extremely smart people trying to figure out more about these topics, but it's just an extremely complex area of study. So now that we have a better understanding of modern cosmology, let's talk a little bit more about ancient cosmology. If we're going to look at what Genesis has to say about cosmology, then the first thing we should probably ask is, why was Genesis written? What questions is Genesis designed to answer, right? So all ancient cosmologies in the time of Genesis were looking to answer the question, who is God and what is his relationship with his creation? Genesis wasn't written to answer the questions that a lot of times we try to pose to Genesis today. The ancient Israelites had a lot more important things going on than trying to figure out if the universe was created in 7 literal days or 7 long periods of time or something like that. Those are very important questions to ask, and Genesis is chock full of truth about lots of interesting things. But for them, the more important topic was, who am I? Why am I here, right? Where did all of this come from? And why is it here? What is our purpose, right? So for married couples, especially the married couples in the back in the room, you'll know that when somebody asks you, all right, how did it happen, right? So one of the people in the couple is going to look at the other one and be like, are you going to tell a story? Am I going to tell a story, right? You should tell a story. You tell it much better than I do, that sort of thing. And they'll launch in this tirade about how they saw the other person from across the room, and they knew they were getting married, like right then, right? You fast forward, and they were going on dates, and you fast forward, and they were engaged, right? And they tell you this story of how their relationship blossomed into a marriage. And if you were to look back at that relationship with a video camera on all their dates and all of their meetings, you would look back and go, man, there's some discrepancies here. Some of the, this date didn't happen before that date, like you said it did. And this one that you said turned out to be a really good date. It doesn't look like you're having a whole lot of fun there. So you might, with video evidence, you might come out with actually a very different idea of what their relationship looked like, or even what the destiny of their relationship was, than you would with their personal rendition. And so the point is that when they're telling you that story, they're not being dishonest. They're not even being untruthful. They're actually being more truthful, because they're giving you the story from their perspective of how their relationship blossomed into a marriage, right? It's not, you weren't asking the question, what was the sequence of events that happened in the 6 months leading up to your marriage? What you asked was, how did your relationship turn into a marriage, right? And that's the question that they're answering. So when we're looking at Genesis, we need to keep in mind that sort of a mindset as well. All right, so the Israelites had just recently been freed from slavery in Egypt, and they were wandering out in the desert, right? So who were Israel's neighbors? On the west side, the other west. For you guys, this is the west side. On the west side, it was Egypt. On the east side, it was Babylon. And what did they know about Yahweh? Almost nothing, right? So when Moses goes to Pharaoh and he says, hey, we want to have this festival out in the wilderness to celebrate Yahweh, Pharaoh goes, I don't know who Yahweh is, right? He's never heard of Yahweh. And so we come at this from the perspective of knowing the rest of the Bible, right? But the Israelites didn't have that benefit. They didn't have all of this long history of interactions with Yahweh. So what is the purpose of Genesis? It establishes who Yahweh is. It sets the record straight for the Israelites in a world that's dominated by paganism on all sides, right? All right. So the idea is that we're going to be tourists to a faraway place, both in distance and in time. So you guys know, those of you who've traveled before, that going to a distant country is already a huge culture shock. And we're going to be going to a faraway place, both in space and in time. So we need to make an effort to step into their ancient perspective, find the truths that they would have understood from this presentation that they've had of the book of Genesis, and then we're going to draw those truths back into the modern day and say, how does this apply to us today, right? In 2023, I almost said 2013. Man, I am back in the seats. All right. So the first thing we're going to talk about is Babylonian cosmology, and you'll see that I said it borrows from Sumeria here. That's because Sumeria was the older empire in the area that Babylon occupied, and Babylon came along later and established an empire in the same location. So they basically built their mythology on top of the Sumerian mythology. So as I read this, see if you can spot any similarities between what you know of Genesis and this Babylonian creation myth, all right? This is how the Babylonians made sense of the universe. The first point is that in the beginning, we had fresh water, Apsu, and salt water, Tiamat. And they were mixing together, and all of the gods were birthed out of this mixing of these two waters. The gods existed in a hierarchy of upper-class gods called the Anunnaki and the lower-class gods called the Igigi. And this reflected, that's a fun word, this reflected the Babylonian hierarchical society. So like the high-up people in society, they were meant to be like avatars of the gods, right? The Igigi, those are kind of like the workman gods. Those are the people who are in charge of like the dirt and the wind and things like that. The upper-class gods are too cool for that. So the Igigi, one day, they get tired of their jobs, and they basically stage a strike. And they say, we're tired of keep maintaining the universe. So the Anunnaki agree they're going to create automatons, or humans, to serve as slaves to the gods and help maintain the universe. The humans, as they find out, are loud and smelly, and they produce more humans. So the gods beg Enlil, who is this primordial god from Sumerian mythology, to flood the earth and kill all of the humans. We're tired of them. They smell bad. They're loud. They're keeping me up at night, right? So the god Enki disagrees with this, and he warns a man named Atrahasis to make an ark for 7 days of flood. The gods end up killing Apsu, the freshwater primordial being, which enrages Tiamat. Tiamat becomes this giant water dragon that's going and raises a chimeric army, meaning an army made out of humans and scorpions and bulls, like these kind of half-man, half-beast soldiers. And she's bent on destroying everything. But the gods choose this young upstart god named Marduk as their champion. And Marduk rides out on his storm cloud chariot. He defeats Tiamat, and he splits Tiamat's body in half to divide the waters below from the waters above, the water from the sky. All right? So think about what are some of the common themes that you see in this creation myth versus in the Bible. All right. Let me see. All right. So what are the similarities between the two? Actually, let me go back really quick. I don't want to talk about it just yet. So what are the similarities between the two? We see a lot of similarities that arise because of a shared cultural understanding to describe how order has been created out of disorder, right? So just like you and I would talk about stars and galaxies and protons and neutrons and atoms and things like that, when we're talking about the universe coming into existence, they talked about this in terms of these cultural elements that we see here. Things like the mixing water as the beginning of the universe and this flood narrative. So remember when we talked about inside jokes at the beginning, without context, they don't make any sense at all, right? And the same is true here. So now that we have this one point of context for the book of Genesis, we're going to be able to see the similarities, right? So the common cultural substrate in which the story is told, but we're also going to be able to see the differences, which is the most important part, because that's going to be the foundation for building up who Yahweh is to the Israelites. All right, so now to the table. So when we look at a comparison between these two creation stories, we see that there's this image of the chaotic water at the beginning of the universe, right? And that doesn't that doesn't mean that there was water before there was the universe. What it's meant is that the water is this chaotic, uncreated state. It's representative of nothing, right? Because something has not been created to the Israelites and to the Babylonians until it's been given order and purpose. So this chaotic water represents non-creation. They're describing how purpose and order came to be in the universe. So for the Babylonian gods, they just create themselves out of the chaos in the universe. They are birthed out of this mixing of waters. But what do we see in Genesis? when we read it earlier, right? That the darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. So unlike Babylonian mythology and unlike Egyptian mythology, which I don't have time to go into right now, God already existed before the universe was given order and purpose, unlike these other gods. Additionally, creation is a constant struggle against chaos, right? Marduk has to defend creation against the forces of chaos. What does God do in creation? He speaks and it instantly obeys, right? There's no fighting involved. Mankind exists in Babylonian mythology as servants to the god, as slaves, right? And by proxy, as servants to the upper class. What is humanity in the Bible? Humanity is God's prized creation, right? It's the only one that bears his likeness. And then finally, we have this flood narrative. So why do the gods flood in Babylonian mythology? It's because they're exhausted of these tired and smelly and disgusting humans that are multiplying all over the place. Whereas in the Bible, we see that God floods the earth because the humans they've brought chaos into his well-ordered and well-purposed world. They've become violent, they've become depraved, and he has to cleanse the world of this incursion. All right. So it's only in the context of these surrounding cultures that we see the truth of Moses' message in Genesis. Yahweh's not part of creation. He existed completely outside of creation. He has absolute authority, and he commands creation with just his voice. He made humans to be his treasured creation, and despite the fact that we brought chaos into his nicely ordered and created world, he still wants nothing more than to bring order to the chaos in our lives and to give us purpose and order and walk with us for eternity, right? So then how do we respond to all of this? Now that we understand that we have this amazing creator who's given purpose and order to the world and wants to give purpose and order to our lives. We do it in 3 ways. Number 1, we respond with reverence. So this verse in Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verses 1 through 3 says, "Guard your steps when you go to the house of God. Go near to listen rather than to offer the sacrifice of fools who do not know that they do wrong. Do not be quick with your mouth. Do not be hasty in your heart to utter anything before God. God is in heaven and you are on earth, so let your words be few. A dream comes when there are many cares, and many words mark the speech of a fool." So what does this mean? This means that we should be worshiping God sincerely and actively prepare for our time to meet with him. So I think that I can probably speak for almost everybody in the room when I say that we were probably all scrambling to get here. You know, we were busy with school earlier today. You're probably thinking while I'm up here about that assignment that you have due tomorrow, right? So don't offer the sacrifice of fools by entering into God's presence without realizing that you're going to be in the presence of the God who created the cosmos, right? So we need to sincerely prepare for our time with him and not use lots of religious words or actions or things like that to just impress other people, right? All right, the second way is we should respond with awe. So this verse here from 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 31 says, "So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God." So I think that this youth group of many should know that God is amazing and inspiring. He's wonderful and he's powerful and he's humbling. So use all of your gifts to bask in his presence and to bring others to do the same. That's exactly my purpose in astronomy. That's your purpose in music and writing and all of the singing, all of the different passions that you have. So be like David. You know, if you feel God's presence when you're writing or drawing or singing, then use that for his glory. Be like Copernicus, who, when he studied the detailed workings of the universe, he said, "The universe has been wrought for us by a supremely good and orderly creator." So everything that you do should point to God, right? And should be focused on him. And then finally, we should respond with relief. So this verse from Jeremiah 29:11 says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. plans to give you a hope and a future. So the idea here is that you're not in control of your lives. It's a hard thing to hear, and it's something that hopefully you'll continue to hear. But the point is that you're not in control of your lives, and you don't have to be, right? You are all in a stressful time of life. You're being tested day after day, both literally and figuratively, and it's not going to get any better. And I don't mean that to turn on everybody's anxiety in the room, trust me, but just to say that every decision that you're making now affects your future, right? And you don't want to have to rely on your own decisions to do that. So because you are the treasured creation of a loving God, warts and all, you can live like that, right? And don't live a life of fear and regret, but instead live a life of freedom and perseverance, right? That you don't have to be white-knuckling your way through life and trying to force it into the path that it needs to go. All right, so what does the Bible tell us about God? It tells us that he's God alone. He has full authority over all of creation, including us, right? And that means that we should respond by giving him all of the glory and all of the honor, and that we don't have to rely on our broken attempts at controlling our future because it's in his hands, right? That's all I have for you tonight. Let's go ahead and pray. God, we thank you for this opportunity that we have to open up your word and to learn about you as the creator, Lord. We just praise you that you are so creative, that you're so powerful, and that you have that you've built this amazing universe that we can study and that we can interact with and be a part of. And God, we're just grateful that you've designed us the way that we are, that we're your creation and that we're your prized children. So, God, I just pray that in this coming week that we would keep in mind your purpose for our lives, that we wouldn't be holding on to what we think our future should look like, but God, that you would be guiding us and that you would bring us relief from having to force our lives into what we want out of them. God, we thank you for this time. We thank you for the word that you've delivered to us today. And God, we just pray that you would protect us as we leave this place. In your name we pray. Amen.